I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. This happened on Halloween of 2013. I was 16 at the time. Me and my sister Lauren, who was 13, and brother Jacob, who was 11, were on our own that very night. Our mom was taking care of our sick grandmother, and our dad was out of town on business. Trick-or-treating in our neighborhood always ended at around 9 o'clock. Our parents never made us go to school the day after Halloween, and it was so we could stay up past our bedtime and watch movies. However, since we were by ourselves and amped up on all the sugar we had consumed, we made other plans. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Wisconsin, but there are a lot of farms here. Our town was pretty much surrounded on all sides by them. In fact, there was a farm just outside our neighborhood, a short walking distance from our house. Every fall, this farm would have an annual pumpkin patch, and we thought it would be fun to go check it out. We didn't plan on vandalizing anything. We just wanted to stroll around and see how creepy the place was in the dark. The pumpkin patch was situated between two large cornfields. About a mile or so behind the patch was the house that the farmer lived in. For the sake of the story, we'll call him Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller had always given me the creeps. There was just something about him that I just couldn't put my finger on. The only way I can describe it is that he didn't seem to be a real person, if that makes any sense. It was like at any moment his skin would fall off and then reveal him to be some kind of alien or something. I know that sounds like a strange thing to say, but I'm telling you, there was always something off about Mr. Miller. The three of us arrived at the dark, deserted pumpkin patch at around 10 o'clock. There was a series of large sheds between Mr. Miller's house and the patch, so we didn't worry about being seen. I remember that there were always a couple of scarecrows off in the distance in the adjacent cornfields. The first thing I noticed when we got there was that there was a third scarecrow that was mounted in the middle of the pumpkin patch. I've been to this patch several times before. Our parents even took us here 2 weeks prior to pick out some pumpkins to make into jack-o'-lanterns, and I never remember seeing a scarecrow here before. It usually wouldn't really be any cause for alarm. It was Halloween after all, right? However, upon seeing the scarecrow, I instantly had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I looked to either side of me and saw the two usual scarecrows standing in the fields. I figured that maybe Mr. Miller wanted to be extra spooky this year. We wandered aimlessly around the pumpkin patch for about 10 minutes. Every so often I would look at the scarecrow and I could swear that its head would be positioned differently every time I'd look at it. It seemed to be watching the three of us as we made our way through the patch. I brushed it off as some kind of optical illusion, coupled with the fact that I was in some weirdo's creepy pumpkin patch in the dead of Halloween night. When we approached the scarecrow, Lauren instantly became uneasy. She was seriously creeped out by the figure. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight to get a better look at it. Even from a distance, you could tell that the other scarecrows that were out in the fields were nothing but straw stuffed into some clothes. But this one was different. A lot of effort went into its design. It was mounted to a pole in the typical scarecrow stance. It was wearing a pair of dirty overalls with a red patterned flannel shirt underneath. Its head was a burlap sack with a jack-o'-lantern's face stitched onto it, and it was wearing a black conical hat with a pair of matching black boots. As my phone's dim light passed over its surface, I noticed these dark red stains on the overalls. As I was examining the straw man, Jacob, being the little shit that he was, came between me and Lauren. "I bet you're too chicken to take off its mask," he said. Me never passing up the chance to show up my little brother, accepted the dare, only on the condition though that he would have to forfeit all of his Reese's that he gathered that night. After Jacob agrees to those terms, I had Lauren hold my phone's light on the scarecrow while I made my way towards it. As I got closer, the sinking feeling that I mentioned earlier became stronger. However, my desire for those delicious peanut butter cups and the satisfaction I would get eating them right in front of Jacob overpowered my fear. Now only inches away from it, I slowly reached for the burlap sack. That's when the unthinkable happened. One of the scarecrow's arms shot forth, and the gloved hand grabbed my wrist. The first thing I heard was Lauren screaming as the flashlight then vanished. The next thing I heard was two of my siblings taking off on foot, leaving me for dead. I tried pulling away, but the scarecrow's grip was too tight. I yanked and yanked, but it was no use. I then looked up in absolute horror to see that the scarecrow was now leaning forward on its pole and it was looking me dead in the eye. I was like a deer in the headlights. I stopped struggling and just stared back at the stitched-on grinning face. A muffled voice then came from beneath the burlap sack, and what was said really caught me off guard. "Happy Halloween." And with that, the scarecrow let me go. I never ran so fast before in my life. I hauled the hell out of there back towards my neighborhood. I met Lauren and Jacob outside the entrance to our neighborhood. They were really relieved to see that I was still alive. I'm glad I got to them before one of them called our mother, because we all could have been in some deep crap if she found out that we went to the pumpkin patch after dark. After giving them both a harsh scolding for ditching me, we walked home. Even now, it still baffles me to think that someone would be out there in the dark, deserted pumpkin patch long after it closed, dressed up as a scarecrow, just waiting for someone to come along. I don't know if it was Mr. Miller or one of his farm hands, but when my parents offered to take us back there the following year, all three of us promptly turned them down. I may have gotten the daylight scared out of me that night. However, I did really enjoy eating all of Jacob's Reese's Cups the following day.
This happened about 3 years ago, and it was just after I had gotten into university. I was really proud of myself, and I had managed to pass a really difficult entrance exam, and I was looking forward to trying life in the city alone for the first time. I knew it was going to be a big step, but I was ready for it. I come from the countryside, so it was going to be all new for me and tough to leave the little support network and friends that I made there. My first year at university was a mix of excitement and adjustment. I made friends with some other students, and my mom would often come to visit, using my place as a kind of hotel. I didn't mind. It was nice to hear how my family was doing and see her, and I guess it was her way of making sure that I was okay, and I guess that she missed me too. When I started my second year of university in April, my mom came to visit again. Apparently one of her favorite artists had a concert nearby, so she decided to use my place as her hotel, as per usual. I thought at the time, oh great, here we go again, but since she sends me money every month, I couldn't really complain. I didn't want to risk having my allowance reduced, and those were the days. Now that morning she said, "I'm going to the concert today, so I'll be back pretty late." Okay, I nodded while eating the miso soup that she had made. And out of nowhere she said, "So, how do you feel about this apartment?" "What do you mean?" I asked, a little taken aback by the sudden question. "Any weird neighbors or noisy people or anything?" "I don't know," I replied. Between my part-time job, classes, and parties, I hardly knew who lived in my building. But I did remember that there was a girl from the same university on my floor. She seemed pretty outgoing, always having friends over for drinks, and I envied her a bit for that. "Well, whatever. You got work today, right?" my mom asked. "Yeah," I nodded. "Well, try not to stay out too late." "Okay." I wanted to tell her to come home early too, but I just kept that thought to myself. When I got back that night and said I'm back, the apartment was pitch black. It was 8:30 p.m. and my mom wasn't back yet. I was hungry, but since it was a bit warm and sweaty that day, I decided to just take a shower first. While I was in the shower, I heard some rattling sounds, and I figured my mom had come back. I saw a dark figure moving through the frosted glass door as she entered the bathroom. "Oh, you're back early, Mom," I called out, but there was no response. "Hey, do you want to go get some ramen?" I asked, and I heard a ch sound, like someone clicking their tongue, and with that, the dark figure disappeared. What's up with that? I thought, stepping out of the bathroom. She usually loved ramen. As soon as I got out of the bathroom, a smell hit me immediately. "Ew, that stinks," I blurted out. It smelled like kerosene, which was weird because I didn't use a kerosene heater. As I was wondering why, I heard the front door unlocking and my mom walked in. "You came in just to go back outside again?" I asked, confused. And she looked at me, kind of puzzled. "What do you mean? Didn't you just come in a few minutes ago?" "No, I just got here," she said, holding bags filled with concert merchandise. "So who was that in the bathroom?" My mind raced as I told my mom what happened. Panicked, she called the police, and they came right away. We quickly discovered that nothing was stolen and that there were no signs of forced entry. I guess I didn't fully close the door when I walked in, or something. And the police suggested maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe a neighbor had one too many drinks and walked in what they thought was their apartment but got it wrong, realized their error and left. And my mom was furious, but it made me wonder if I had imagined it all. Maybe I was just tired. I wasn't able to fully convince myself of that because of that strange smell of kerosene. The week after that strange incident was one of the longest and most nerve-wracking of my life. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off, and I found myself jumping at every little noise and double-checking the locks on my door multiple times a day. I even contemplated moving to a different place, but my lease wasn't up, and finding a new apartment in the city wasn't easy or cheap. A week after that strange incident, something terrible happened. The girl who lived on my floor was murdered by the middle-aged man who lived below us. After he went through that terrible act, he set his apartment on fire, and he went with it. The news and internet said the girl had riled up other neighbors by having parties often and making lots of noise, and that's why she was targeted. But that wasn't really true. Even when she had friends over, you could barely hear them. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't help but wonder if the dark figure I saw that day was actually him. Maybe I was his initial target, but he backed off because my mom was there and would come back soon. The idea that I could have been in that poor girl's shoes kept me awake at night, and for days I replayed the incidents in my head, trying to find some clarity, some sign that could tell me what really happened. I remembered every detail, the sound of the door, the figure behind the frosted glass, and the smell of kerosene. It was all too real to have been a figment of my imagination. I'll never know for sure what happened that night, and that uncertainty is something that I've had to live with. The police closed the case quickly after the man died, labeling him as a deranged individual with a grudge against the noisy neighbors. They didn't dig any deeper, and there were no leads, no witnesses besides me, and I wasn't even sure of what I saw. All I can do is pray for the girl who lost her life. May she rest in peace. Even now, years later, I occasionally think back to that night.
This all happened this year in 2024. When I first met Cheyenne, she seemed like a nice friend. We got along well, and soon she became part of our friend group. Everything seemed fine, and when she started dating my friend Sean, it felt like she was really becoming an even closer part of our circle. For a while, things were good between them, but then out of nowhere, she broke up with Sean over Messenger. It was really sudden and unexpected, leaving us all surprised. After the breakup, things took an even darker turn. Cheyenne left me a voicemail, the first of what would become a series of threatening messages. In that voicemail, she did something unforgivable. She used a racist slur, a word that no one should ever say, let alone direct at someone else. One of my friends who's African American was particularly hurt and angry when he found out. That one word shattered whatever was left of the friendship that we had with her. A few days later, Cheyenne sent me another voicemail. This time she was apologizing, to me at least. But even as she apologized, she made it clear that she had no intention of apologizing to Sean. I knew right away that her apology was fake, just a way to manipulate the situation and maybe get me to side with her. It didn't work, but that wasn't the end. Months later, Cheyenne would do the same thing again. this time directing her racist and threatening behavior at another friend of ours who's also African American. It was beyond uncool. It was deeply hurtful and dangerous. Her actions made it clear that she was no longer the person we thought she was. Then came the day of the hit list. I received a message from a random phone number that contained a list of names, with mine at the very top. The message read, "Hi, my name is Cheyenne," followed by the list of people that she was targeting. My name was first on that list. She continued to send threatening messages, one of which even said, "Bitch, shut the hell up. If you don't like me, get my name out of your damn mouth." I responded calmly, stating that I could call the police if needed, but the threats just kept coming. Something in my brain told me that I needed to take action. I knew that I couldn't just let these threats go unanswered, so I called 911. The police came to my house and I gave them my statement. They took the situation seriously, documenting everything. Having the police involved made me feel a little safer, but the fear still lingered. Cheyenne even went as far as to say, "I know where you live, bitch." This was no longer just an angry rant. It felt like a serious threat to my safety and the safety of my friends. We had no choice but to consider taking legal action. Cheyenne had crossed a line, and her behavior was spiraling out of control. Throughout this time, Cheyenne tried to make me look like the bad guy. She texted my mom on Facebook trying to twist the story to make herself look like the victim and then paint me as the problem. And it didn't stop there. At one point, I called her out on her bullshit in another messenger group chat. I wanted to make it clear to our friends that Cheyenne was not someone we should trust. But the person who created the group chat didn't know what Cheyenne had been doing to the rest of us. I was mad at him for unknowingly giving her a platform. But later I forgave him through a text, understanding that he just didn't know the full story. Recently, Cheyenne moved into a group home that's close to where my girlfriend Bradley and Sean live. She's about half an hour away from me, but her proximity to my friends has added to the stress and concern we're all feeling. It doesn't help that my friend Ricky is obsessed with Cheyenne. Despite everything she's done, he seems fixated on her, which only complicates the situation further. Even though she's in a group home where she's close to my girlfriend and my friend Bradley but a little ways away from me, it still scares me that she could get a job one day, collect enough money, and potentially come and find us to harm us. Mostly me, because I'm at the top of the hit list. As someone like me who's half blind, I don't think my pocket knife will defend me forever. Thankfully for now, I can enjoy my music and my audiobooks to calm me down, especially next week with my upcoming break until the new class starts. I might not be so lucky with the new teachers. It depends on if they'll be nice enough to hear my story and maybe let me listen to music while I do my work in the classroom. This just goes to show, guys, that if you feel like there's a friend who doesn't seem right, cut them out of your life. It's best to protect yourself before things escalate like they did for me. I'm originally from Mexico, and for reasons that will become very obvious, I wish to remain anonymous. I was involved in the Mexican cartel. I mainly transported drugs across the border into the United States. To make a long story short, I was caught and cooperated with the feds in exchange for immunity and asylum. Before I go any further, you can all go ahead and label me a snitch if you want to. I don't care. I personally feel pretty good about ratting out a bunch of drug-dealing murderers who work for an organization that's responsible for destroying so many fellow Mexicans' lives. I was forced into this life at a young age. I've always hated the cartel, and I was already plotting a way to flee Mexico with my mother and two younger sisters. You could say it was a good thing that I ended up getting caught. This story is not about how I got out of the cartel, though. It's about the closest call I've ever had during my time with the cartel. This happened during the early days. It was the summer of 2005. I remember the date specifically because I had just turned 18 a day prior. Even though I was barely an adult, I was a very intimidating looking guy. I come from a long line of very physically strong men. I've been lifting weights since I was a child. I'm an even-tempered guy, and I don't even consider myself an aggressive person, but I'll put someone through a wall if they piss me off. It was because of my physical presence and my piece of crap father, who was also in the cartel, that made me a target for recruitment. When I first started out, myself and 2 other guys would drive around Mexico City and collect debts and packages from people who owed money to the cartel or one of our distributors. It was on the 4th or 5th run that we ran into some trouble. There was this particular club we frequented where a lot of business was conducted. To make things simple for you, an exchange would go down in a back room, and we would come shortly after and collect the revenue and then drop it off to our capo. So that night we entered the club and began making our way to the back room. It was a fairly busy night for the club. This DJ from out of town was performing there, so people from all over were there to see him. To get to the back room, we had to go through the main dance floor to the opposite side of the building. There were some renovations that prevented us from using the back entrance. We got out onto the dance floor and started making our way through the crowd. When we were about halfway there, I then saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was the barrel of a shotgun being pointed directly at me. I quickly ducked, and not a second later, I heard the gun go off. Unfortunately, an innocent girl who was standing beside me caught the bullet. She was shot at point-blank range, and I don't mean to be insensitive when I say this, but the poor girl's head was blasted apart. I remember several things happening simultaneously after the shotgun went off. All of the partygoers immediately fled the club. From my position on the ground, all I saw was a wave of moving legs. When I stood up, I saw a deserted club, my 2 coworkers with their guns drawn cursing up a storm, and unfortunately the corpse of the young girl who was just shot. I assumed that the shooter got away in the chaos. We quickly busted into the back office to find another bullet-ridden corpse. It was of the club owner who was our contact. We immediately fled the scene before the police showed up. I was never informed as to what happened with the club owner and who almost took my head off with a shotgun. I was on the lowest rank of the cartel, and they kept us in the dark about a lot of the things. I'm very grateful that I'm no longer a part of that life. I'd like to end things by giving a big screw you to the person who tried to kill me and ended up shooting an innocent girl that night. And to all those cartel members who got locked up because of me, you got what you deserved, and I'll see you in hell.